Good morning, everybody. Oh dear, I'm frozen, aren't I? I can fix that. Morning, Chris. Hey, Martin and Chris. There we go. Hey, Crit and Barbara. Morning, Timothy. Hey, Melissa. Morning, Larry and Lisa and Rodney, Heidi, Scott, Diane, Heather. Hey, everybody.
Who take their responsibilities very seriously in purveying good music to the dancing public. And now, an original arrangement by Benny Goodman of Jingle Bells.
Jingle bells. Like that. Morning, Betsy and Bob, Joyce, Lisa, Boca Tove. Hey, Dad. Hey, Denise, Susan, Betsy. Hey, Vega over on YouTube. Hey, Robert. Hey, Lisa, Kathleen, hey, Cheryl. Hey, Todd, hey, Cheryl. Hey, have a good walk, Beth. Hey, Larry and Patty and Nancy. Hey, Kelly and Beverly. Hey, Jim. Oh, look who's here. Hop on up, Miles. It's okay. Hey, Vicky. Hey, Jim. Hey, Ann. Hey, welcome back, Kay. Hey, Octavio, Bruce, Alexandra. Hey, Colleen. You know, the audio does seem a little low today. Hang on. I'm going to turn that up a bit. Here we go. Hey, Count over on YouTube. Morning, Kim. Hey, Timothy. Hey, Robert. Yeah, I hope everybody's all right. Mandy got caught by that tornado that crossed 4 states while driving up back home from down south. Kristen, we will definitely cover the underpants. Have a good time at the con. Hey, Meg. Hey, Taro. Morning, Leah. Miles? We got 3 of them knock something down there. Ah. My face on a bag? I don't know about my face on a bag. He can be the face on a bag. You can put the bag with his face over my head if you want. Hey, Lydia. Hey, Karen. Morning, John. Hey, Susan. Hey, Daniel in LA. Morning, Dina. Miles is just all over the desk anytime I'm sitting here lately.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra playing in the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman playing Where Am I?
Out of your way. Jackie, yeah, I got a haircut about a week ago. Hey, Jenna, everybody's taking off today. Morning, Gladys. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Tracy. Hey, David. Hey, Peter. Geez, all my stuff's falling all over the place today. Everything's in a tangle. Hey, Sherry in Seattle. Hey, Audrey. Morning all around. Hey, happy birthday, Marita. Hey, Electra. Morning, Richard. Hey, Migler, welcome back. Hey, Grace. Hey, Doreen. Hey, Pam, welcome. Audrey, that may be. Hey, Christine. Oh, hey, Priya. I got 2 cats down here on my desk right now. Vying for the attention. Morning, John. Hey, Grace. Hey, yeah. Morning, Carol. Just have a seat, Miles. You know I can't play until I'm done talking here. I have a presentation to give. Aw. Flopping down on the desk. Morning, everybody.
And that was Helen Ward singing, appearing more bewilderingly lovely than bewildered. And now, an unforgettable Irving Berlin tune.
Helen Ward singing, appearing more bewilderingly lovely than bewildered. Hey, Mary Jo. Morning, Ashley. Let's just relax here, okay? Miles, you were all settled in. Just relax. It's okay, baby. You'll be okay. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Christine. I just added in... I realized there wasn't nearly as much Mount Carmel in this deck as I thought there was. Most of the Mount Carmel stuff for the gangsters is over in the True Crime in Chicago Cemeteries tour. So I quick moved some into here this morning. I was all set to go an hour ago, then I realized, wait a minute. Miles, just have a seat, okay? Have a seat. Oh, good stand. Morning, Dave and Barb. Hey, Mona and Marie. There you go. Have a seat. Morning, Emily. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Karen. Hey, Kelly and Wendy. Chan, that will be an interesting transition. Morning, Deanna. Hey, Nancy. Hiya, Gail. Good morning, Mom. I'm kind of tired today. Hey, Chuck.
And now here is the guest series sons of the program. Joe Harris presenting...
Amy, I'll give it a shot.
The music goes around and around.
And if I start doing weird, I can't really stick with any one voice or accent or anything for more than a line or two, or it starts to get awkward. I mean, on Ghost Tour, some people think I'm going to talk like this the whole time, but after about a minute of that, you start to look like a first-class ding-dong. Or look like the ghost of Vasquez Castle. Permit me one last magic performance. Morning, Lynn. Hey, Martha and Patricia and Connie in Southwest Michigan. Hey, Rodney. We'll give Benny Goodman another minute or so to keep going here. Hey, Paula. Hey, Kathy and French Lick. Hey, Lisa. Priya, I don't know what you're playing with, but I doubt it's a toy. Yeah, just sit down. It's definitely not a toy. These are not toys. Hey to Patches. Morning, Jeffrey. And good morning, Kathy in Lake Ozark. Priya, do not play with that. That's definitely not a toy. You just say no if somebody offers you that. Thanks, Veronica. Christmas mob stories. I wonder if I could come up with some good Christmas ones. I don't need more Christmas stuff. It's the season of stress and clutter. Morning, Janice in California. We'll let Benny Goodman finish up this song and then we'll get started. Priya, just relax. Both of you just sit back and relax. I got two cats on my desk right now, as you see. Morning, Vicky. All right.
The Broadcasting Company is presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And it is necessary to say, get happy?
Is it necessary to say, get happy, asked the guy. Well, all right, I don't know if that's quite necessary, because we're all happy to be here. Naturally, welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. With me, as always, are Miles and Priya over here on the desk. I've been a tour guide and historian for about almost 20 years now here in Chicago. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including H.H. Holmes' The True History of the White City Devil, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, Mysterious Chicago, and the brand new Murder Maps USA, now at fine booksellers near you, called A Veritable Cornucopia of Crime by the New York Times. But you know, if you're going to work in Chicago history, you really kind of can't not get involved in the Chicago gangster scene now and then. I did do a book called American Mafia Chicago under a different name. We used a different name because didn't necessarily want to tick off the neighbors. But after all, I am incredibly famous. I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel talking about this stuff all the time. Got a meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. But we can never quite get away from this aspect of Chicago history. On Thursday night, when we covered the Sam Cardinella gang, we talked about some of the crime scene in Chicago in the 1910s before Prohibition really picked up. Prohibition, of course, changed everything, because after Prohibition ended drinking in Chicago, at least legally, it didn't necessarily stop people from wanting to. The price just went up and up and up. There's this terrific thing from 1920, right after liquor was made illegal, in which the wandering reporter went around town and asked people on Austin Avenue, which would be like Grand Avenue now, and Kinsey Street, and asked them, what do you think of the new booze compared with the old? And every line he got was just great. Mr. Gibson says, there's a fight in every pint and a murder in every gallon. I used to drink the old stuff, but I'll tell the world I leave the new alone. Of course, he'd already tried it. J.W. Johnson said, I liked the old stuff better. It was much cheaper and you didn't feel so bummed the next AM. The only difference I see is they've raised the price of headaches. Once again, he has clearly tried it. Harry Brown says you could take half a dozen shots of the old stuff and never feel it. Take 2 drinks of the new booze, it's goodbye, George. His name was not George. But once again, he's definitely notices that we definitely notice that he's clearly tried it. But meanwhile, John A. Schmidt, an investigator who lived about a block south of Graceland Cemetery, says, "The effect is altogether different, judging by the stories I read in the paper. I would say the new booze excites a man to do things he would never have done under the influence of the old." Sure, from what he reads in the papers. And one more, Mr. Winsberg says, "Because they can't get it, they want it all the more. The new stuff is causing more deaths each day. It knocks you off your feet, and after taking half a dozen shots, you want to climb a tree." This is not normally a side effect you hear about getting drunk wanting to climb a tree. Sounds pretty good to me. But of course, all but one of these guys admitted that they had actually had some of the stuff. Prohibition was already not working, which of course left a big opening for guys like Al Capone to roll in, start brewing whatever they wanted to, and pretty much charging whatever they wanted to. It was like brewing your own money. And Al Capone has kind of haunted Chicago in a figurative sense ever since. Go overseas, the first thing people say when they hear from Chicago is, "Oh, Al Capone, bang, bang." To this day, that still goes on quite a bit. And around Chicago, you tend to hear every other building. Al Capone threw parties here. Al Capone owned this place. It is almost never actually true. But over the course of this presentation, we will talk about the man and his era and show you all of the places in the Loop area that we can actually trace Al Capone to. There are a couple of them. They're not some of the more famous ones. We're going to start with, well, we talked a while, just the other day as a refresher course, we talked a little bit about the 1910s, the era of Sam Cardinella, who ran a pool hall right down the block over here, where he was teaching kids to commit crimes. This was where the money is at the time, stuff like this. But there wasn't nearly as much money as there was going to be in bootleg liquor. Now, as of 1920, when 1920 rolled around, the main head of vice operations in Chicago was down here in the South Loop area. This is the 2200 block of South Wabash. And just on the other side, in the 2100 block, just past where the White Castle is now, we'll pull right up to the space, was Mr. Colosimo's Cafe. Occupied right in that little space right there. This was run by a guy named Big Jim Colosimo, who for about the last 20 years at this point had been the head of vice operations in Chicago. The restaurant was more or less legit. More or less. There were opera singers by day, at 1 hour, then the jazz singers would come in later on. Mr. Colosimo himself, though, was kind of in charge of everything. If you were running a numbers racket or black hand operations or anything like that around Chicago, you were probably paying off Big Jim. But when Prohibition got started, he is said to have gathered everybody together and said, "I'm not really wild about the idea of getting into bootleg liquor here in Chicago." He had just married one of his chorus girls, was kind of thinking he ought to straighten up and fly right a little bit, so he didn't want to move into bootleg liquor. This made him quite the target. Here's his body on the floor of the place. To this day, nobody really knows who exactly shot him. The more common theory is that they brought in Frankie Yale, a gangster from Chicago that Capone had worked for originally, to come and take care of things. It makes sense that they would bring in somebody from out of town, but Frankie Yale was pretty high up to be doing this kind of grunt work all by himself. But with Big Jim out of the question, a guy named John Torrio took over. Torrio's mugshot is curiously absent from this stack, it turns out. But one interesting thing, too, is Big Jim got one of the first really big gangster funerals. This is Oakwood Cemetery, where he's got a mausoleum. This was one of those funerals where people just lined the streets trying to get a look at the hearse going by. And that would become a kind of a standard over the next decade or so. All the gangster funerals tried to outdo each other with sheer truckloads of flowers, tens of thousands of admirers lining the streets. But with him out of the way, John Torrio gathered everybody together and said, "All right, so here's what we're going to do from now on. We are definitely doing bootleg liquor in Chicago, but what we're not going to do is fight. We're going to carve the city up into territories. You take yours, we'll take ours. There's going to be plenty of money for everybody." And believe it or not, this worked for at least a couple of years. Now, he had as his lieutenant a young kid who had used to work for Frankie Yale back in New York, Mr. Al Capone himself. This is Capone at about the age of 30. I'll just let that sink in a little bit more. Capone at 30. First time he made the news was when he was caught driving drunk down Randolph Street. This is footage of recreating the route. It wasn't one way at the time. But he was heading towards Wabash Street when he crashed into a parked taxi cab, then jumped out of the car and started waving a pistol around, threatening to shoot anybody who said that it was his fault. The newspapers called him Alfred Capone, which was very common at the time. They almost always called him Capone, really up into the 1930s. But he crashed into the machine owned by a guy named Fred Krause, started waving his gun around, saying, "I'll arrest anybody who said it was me." Taken to the central station, Capone threatened the arresting officer with immediate discharge and promised his pull would make things unhealthy for his prosecutors. "I'll fix this thing so easy you won't know how it's done," he is alleged to have boasted. He was locked up and later bailed out. Goodness, what a jerk. And this is the classic, "Do you know who I am? I'm going to have every last one of you fired" crap. Eventually, working under Torrio, he got a lot better at public relations. Torrio kind of took Capone under his wing, taught him the difference between saying, "Are you looking for trouble?" and "We don't want any trouble." So this also gives us one location that we can take him to, that we can trace him to for real. He was taken to Central Station. And that was a police station that was built into City Hall. So the current standing City Hall was built in 1911. This is one place that we can definitely trace Capone. He was definitely in this building. He was also in the old courthouse that is around the corner from over here. He was brought into attorneys' offices for questioning a couple of times up here, and I'll speed this up a little. This courthouse. For instance, when his brother Frank Capone was shot, he was brought in here for questioning. Here's a picture of him at the time. They're already starting to call him Scarface Capone, which you never called him to his face. He would claim that he got a scar on his face in World War I. He did not actually serve in World War I. He got it in a bar fight back in New York. He was also brought in when he was taken in for questioning for the murder of John Duffy, a gangster who'd been taken for a one-way ride. At the time, he was said to say, "I am just a businessman. For no reason at all, everybody's always trying to drag me into something." They note here that he was the proprietor of the Four Deuces Saloon at 2222 South Wabash, which was right where this space is right now. It's a little empty lot, but it looked like this at the time. And Patty in the comments asks, is there anybody here related to these gangsters? I almost guarantee you somebody will pop up and say that they are. It's a common thing on all Chicago tourism. Lots of people think they have family connections to the gangsters, probably far more than actually did. And all over the country, between the Midwest and the Gulf of Mexico, every little town has a story that Al Capone had a hideout here or dug out some tunnels here. It's almost never actually true. But the Four Deuces Club survived up until the 1960s, though by then it had been a lot of other different things. He was often referred to as the owner of this in the press, though officially it was a furniture store. 1924, he was rumored to have been shot to death, which he said was greatly exaggerated, borrowing the old Mark Twain line. And around the same time, this guy John Duffy had been killed. It was the North Side gangsters who killed him. He was one of their own who wasn't performing up to standards, but they made sure to have him be seen right outside of the Four Deuces Club just before they took him on that one-way ride. So with things like this going around, Torrio and Capone were getting tired of Dean O'Banion, the guy who ran the North Side mob. O'Banion had done a couple of double-crossing maneuvers, and finally, they kind of wanted to get rid of the guy. Trouble is, the Union Siciliana, a civic organization that was essentially a front for the mob, was run by a guy named Mike Merlot, who really didn't want any killings. Even Torrio didn't dare go behind his back to kill Dean O'Banion, much as he wanted to. But meanwhile, right here where the One Chicago building has now gone up, in the year a year and a half or so since I've got this footage, down here on State Street, just below Chicago Avenue, was Dean O'Banion's flower shop, Schofield's. It was one of his flower shops. He and Mr. Schofield were partners on a couple. I think O'Banion himself probably spent most days working at the one that was up by Devon and Broadway, because he lived right over there on Ridge. It was a much closer ride in for him. Dean O'Banion was just a young kid, really. He was only in his early 20s. A few years before, he had been a singing waiter over at a place where the Kerryman restaurant is now. But One grim day in November of 1924, with Torrio breathing down his neck, he came down here to work at the main store down on State Street, partly because Mike Merlot had just died. And Merlot had died of natural causes. He is now interred at Mount Carmel Cemetery. And his funeral was another of those, though it would be kind of a stretch to call him a gangster. He was kind of peripherally next to the gangsters, didn't do much of the dirty work himself. But the crowd around his house was very similar to what you'd see with a gangster funeral out here. So inside of Schofield's, a few guys popped in, widely believed to have been the Jenna Brothers gang, who operated out of Little Italy and worked mostly for Torrio and Capone. There's various theories as to who this actually was, but they walked into this place as though they were buying flowers from Mike Merlot. And Dean O'Banion said, "Hey, are you guys here for Merlot?" At this point, they stood right about here by the case full of flowers, grabbed him by the hand as though to shake his hand, then gave him what is called the Chicago handshake, in which you shake somebody's hand, stick a gun in their guts, and fire several times. So that was the first real killing. Under Torrio's orders, somebody, possibly the Jenna brothers, moved right in, and O'Banion ended up not too far away from Mike Merlot over at Mount Carmel Cemetery. Really, just about all of these guys ended up there. The Jenna brothers have a mausoleum there as well. In fact, when the first of the Jenna brothers was interred, Genevieve Forbes Herrick of the Tribune overheard a guy saying, well, O'Banion's over there, Mike Merlot's over there, and now Jenna's in here. When Judgment Day comes and then tombs open up, there's going to be hell to pay in this cemetery. This was also kind of the beginning of the great period in which newspapers started thinking of these guys as Robin Hood type characters. The day after O'Banion was killed, this was the headline in the Tribune. O'Banion gang like pirates of olden days. Beer trucks their ships of gold. A month later came that incident when it was rumored that Al Brown, alias Al Capone, had been shot to death. And about a year after the fact, this was really when the gang war particularly heated up. Now, just about a year later, right across the street, Mother, I think that text was not for me. Right across the street, you can see Schofield's across the street. In front of it is Holy Name Cathedral. A bunch of Capone guys killed Jaime Weiss, who was the guy who took over for Dean O'Banion as head of the North Side Mob. In fact, it is widely claimed that this little notch in Holy Name Cathedral is a bullet hole from the death of Jaime Weiss. It is absolutely not. This is where they used to have a tube to connect the lighting mechanism for a plaque that used to be up there for one of those message board signs. And I know that the cathedral just hates it when people call this a bullet hole. This is not what Tommy gun bullet holes look like anyway. This is a lot more neat and round. But the reason they were shooting Jaime Weiss was that Weiss had been involved in trying to get revenge on Torrio for the death of O'Banion. So right down here at 7011 South Clyde was Torrio's place. One day Torrio was getting out of his car up in front of it, and three guys pounced on him. Vinny the Schemer Drucci, Jaime Weiss, and Bugs Moran. These guys walked up right to the entryway here, shot him several times, including a shot in the face, but Moran walked up to fire the killing shot and found out that he was out of bullets. So, Torrio was shot. The police started hunting around for the O'Banion guys, including, Vinny the Schemer Drucci is one of the goofiest of the gangsters. They called him the Schemer because he was always coming up with plans like, hey, why don't we go to England and steal the crown jewels? Why don't we run one of our guys for the mayor? Also got involved in probably Chicago's greatest car chase. The Michigan Avenue Bridge was raising up as a drawbridge. He managed to jump the gap in his car. And the cops were right behind him. They made the jump too, but then got stuck in traffic right on the other side, so it was all kind of for nothing. Bugs Moran would later become the head of the North Side Mob, partly because Dean and Jaime were dead. Jaime, as we just covered, was shot outside a Holy Name Cathedral, and once again ended up at Mount Carmel Cemetery. Now, a few years later, they were just arresting all the known suspicious characters during an election. Drucci was picked up and while driving over the Clark Street Bridge, allegedly started reaching for the cop's gun. Whether he was really reaching for the gun or not is kind of an open question, but once he did, the cop shot him to death. And he is also at Mount Carmel Cemetery under his real name, Vincent D'Abruzio. D'Ambrosio. So after this attempt on Torrio's life, though, in 1925, Torrio decided to retire. He turned everything over to Al Capone, moved out of the country, moved out of town, went back to New York, would still occasionally show up for gang-related matters. Now, after this, Capone was pretty much in charge. Jaime Weiss especially wasn't nearly as good a leader as Dino Banyan had been, and with him out of the way, Drucci was even worse. Bugs Moran, frankly, was not that great of a leader either. He just got the job because everybody else was too busy being dead. Now, starting from this period, you start hearing that Capone owned practically every building that was standing in Chicago. Really, the main place that we can trace him to at all is this little two-flat coming up over here down at 7244 South Prairie. This was the house where he lived with his brother and his mother. Still standing today, comes up on the market every now and then, but really it's just a very ordinary house of the time period. He didn't officially have any income whatsoever, so buying things, especially in his own name, would have been very difficult. Doing any kind of real estate transactions was difficult for these guys. But here's a picture of the house as it appeared at the time of Frank Capone's funeral back in 1924. 3,000 roses were scattered on the floors alone. And you can see it's the same building here. The same one next door is still standing as well. So after a couple of years of shooting like this, a meeting was held at the old Sherman Hotel, which was right where the Thompson Center is now, in which the two factions decided, okay, enough of this killing, we're going to consider all murders closed incidents, all discipline after this will be dealt with internally. Mother, I don't know who you're trying to text, but you're texting somebody other than me, that's why they're not responding to you. So, they gathered here in 1926 for a peace conference, decided that no, we're not going to shoot at each other anymore. That actually worked for a little while. But meanwhile, there was a gangster, a young state's attorney named William McSwiggan, who was going after all of the gangsters. But one day he was out on the west side hanging out with the O'Donnell gang. Exactly what he was doing with them has never been adequately explained. Possibly he was in on some things with them. Possibly he was doing research on them. Some say he was just old friends of theirs and still hung out with them even though they were gangsters. But as he stepped out into the parking lot, a car drove by and shot everybody up, killing him. Now, this is even sometimes rumored to have been Capone himself at firing the gun. It turned out to be the biggest mistake that he made, because this brought all of the feds in. This is John W. Norton finding guns hidden all over Capone's brother's house. This is the same guy who had been digging around in the H.H. Holmes murder castle back in 1895. And in this case, he really did find a lot of hidden passages. He found guns being used as curtain rods, guns hidden among the umbrellas. I've always wondered if he kind of flashed back a bit to digging around for secret passages in the Capone building, in the Holmes building when he went through the Capone place. But by this time, nobody remembered H.H. Holmes anymore, so nobody really asked him about it. But in the course of all of his digging, they found a couple of ledgers that would eventually be used against Capone in court. That was probably what doomed Capone. It just happened several years earlier. Now, there's a couple of stories going around about places we can trace Capone to around the lakeshore in 1927. For one thing, the Grant Avenue Beach in 1927, an Italian aviator showed up. And according to Capone biographies, the city actually had Capone be an invited guest. It shocked all the newspaper reporters to see him sitting among the dignitaries. I've checked all the newspaper reports. None of them say a word about him actually being there. He's also said to have gone to Soldier Field around the same period to watch a boxing match. But once again, I can't really find a good contemporary account that really places him there. He generally, by this time, he was keeping a very low profile. He spent most of his time ducking in and out of the side entrances of B-list hotels. When he came into town on the train, he wouldn't get off at Union Station. He'd get off at far-flung places and then just take a car the rest of the way because he wanted to stay away from people who might want to shoot him. Lots of people wanted to shoot this guy. Now, the gang truce fell apart after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. Which was widely believed to have been revenge for one of the biggest assassinations the gang ever ran, which was right over here where Chase Tower is now, at Madison and Dearborn. Late 1928, the head of the Unione Siciliana, Tony Lombardo, was shot to death right there on the sidewalk. There's his body right next to the manhole. The manhole is no longer there. Now, Lombardo would become the head of the Unione Siciliana. This again was the civic organization that even the mob didn't want to go against, but by the mid-20s, it was basically a front for the mob, and being head of the Unione Siciliana meant that you had a very short lifespan. Just about everybody who took over this job got shot within a couple of months. Lombardo was generally seen as just a puppet for Capone. So the Northsiders wanted to get rid of him right away. Possibly as revenge for them having killed the Southsiders having killed Frankie Yale in New York. But after Tony Lombardo was killed, it is sometimes believed that Capone had this in mind when he ordered the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, up in this little space where there was once a garage on North Clark Street, just above, near Clark and Dickens, just below Webster. It's a little garage called the SMC Cartage Company. 5 members of the Moran, 7 guys affiliated with the Moran gang, plus 2 guys who were just kind of hangers-on, were lined up against the north wall. 2 guys dressed as cops and 2 guys in plain clothes came in as though a regular old liquor raid. Probably said something like, "All right, which one of you mugs is Bugs Moran?" And since Moran wasn't there, they just shot all 7 of them. I won't leave the really gruesome picture up for too long. But this was major news. People had kind of gotten jaded to murder stories in Chicago at the time. We had the reputation as being the murder city, even though places like Memphis and Atlanta had 4 times the murder rate that we did at the time. But the next day it was announced in the Chicago Herald-Examiner that everybody just kind of knew this must have been Al Capone's work. Capone rises to supreme command of the underworld. Moran himself was strangely not present. He was running late or something that day. Among those who were killed was a guy who was supposedly just an optometrist who liked hanging out with gangsters. Personally, I don't really buy that, but it was a guy named Reinhard Schwimmer who is now buried right by the fence at Rose Hill Cemetery. There was one survivor of the massacre, at least for a little while. It was a guy named Frank Gusenberg. And when they got him to the hospital, of course, he insisted nobody shot nobody. Nothing happened here. He kept the gang code right up to his death. He then died of having been shot about 17 times. Now, just to cover a couple of other gangsters that were operating in the area at the time, one of the other guys still going against Capone was Joe Aiello, who had teamed up with the Saltus McErlin gang and was trying to wrestle power away from Capone. By 1927, Capone was not spending a lot of time in Chicago at all anymore. He was spending more of his time in his estate down in Miami. During the time of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, he made sure that he had a meeting with a guy in Miami so nobody would be able to say that he was directly the shooter. This was Joe Aiello's house, still standing right across the street from Indian Boundary Park on Lunt Avenue, up here in West Ridge. He wasn't shot outside of this place. His funeral was here, but they shot him in a house down on the south side. When Capone was in town, he primarily was hanging out at this time at the Metropole Hotel, which was right about where this building is now. They tore it down many years ago at 2300 South Michigan. But then when he came back up in the early 1930s, when he was about to go on trial, he started operating much more famously out of the Lexington Hotel, which was another block or so south on Michigan, and looked about like this. Kind of a larger version of the Metropole. Even at the time when Capone was there were lots of rumors saying that he had an entire floor, that he had tunnels all over the place, and down in the bottom, of course, this is where Geraldo made a complete fool of himself. Squandering a reputation that he never got back and seems determined to lose more all the time, by finding that there was nothing inside it there. Really, yeah, Capone didn't spend that much time in this place. There's no reason to think he would have been stashing any valuables in there. But as the 1930s began, Capone started getting into a lot more trouble. The business community in Chicago just got fed up with the whole thing. A guy named Frank Leish became head of the Crime Commission and organized a group called the Secret Six. The Secret Six was a group of business leaders. We still to this day don't know who exactly they were. There's some lists going around, but they called them the Secret Six for a reason, who just decided to try to make things hotter for the gangsters. And he actually took a meeting with Capone. This is a story he told for the rest of his life. When an election was rolling around, the gangsters had a reputation for really messing with elections, so he arranged for a meeting here, met up with Capone, found that he had a picture of Abraham Lincoln and a picture of George Washington behind his desk, or in some versions he had a picture of Mayor Big Bill Thompson behind his desk, and just said, listen, there's an election coming, we don't want any trouble. And Capone, I guess, was in a generous mood, as he just cheerfully agreed, okay, yeah, we won't mess with anything this time. But it was around this time the Secret Six arranged for Elliott Ness and it to organize what he called his band of untouchables, who operated in Chicago. This was, most of what we know about Elliott Ness and his battles against Capone come straight from Elliott Ness himself. Many of the people who worked with him say, don't listen too much to it, he didn't do half of what he said he did. He all worked from behind the desk. The real work against getting Capone was just the tax evasion charges. But Ness wrote a book. He needed some money after this. Capone, meanwhile, was going on a charm offensive. Get down, Miles. Opening a soup kitchen at 935 State Street, right about where this space is now. But 1931 came. He decided this whole Depression thing was about to be over. So he quit the soup racket. And evidence was given at the trial about what a great guy he was for running this place. Meanwhile, while he was in Miami, Sissy Patterson talked to him at one point. We've talked about Sissy several times. She was the granddaughter of Joseph Medill of the Chicago Tribune, was eventually managed to get an interview with Capone in Miami just by walking up to him. He says he pronounces his name Capone. There's no E to it. She asked him, well, what, do you ever think about just going back to Italy? And he said, I'm not an Italian. I'm an American. I was born in New York City 29 years ago. And she looked at him and said, 29 years ago? Because he looked like he was about 49 at the time. Down at the bottom, there's a great line at the end of this. Women have a special kind of sympathy with gangsters. If you don't understand why, consult Dr. Freud. Meanwhile, she had an easy time finding him in Chicago. She just went by his estate, and there he was, out doing some work in his front yard. Other people had a much harder time finding Capone. Some newspapers sent people all the way over here who spent weeks trying to get a look at the guy, and eventually maybe saw him going into an elevator at one point. He was not really the kind of guy who went to parties. He did not throw parties in Chicago. He spent most of his time just kind of hiding out. But one of the places we can definitely trace him, of course, is right here where the old federal court building was. It is still Federal Plaza to this day. Some of these buildings around here were still up at the time. But at the time where this very small little building is now, was at the time this thing that looks like the Field Museum with the state capitol plopped on top of it. This is where Capone was put on trial for tax evasion charges in 1931. And because of the trial, we do know a couple other places that we can trace him to. For instance, right down here is Marshall Fields, where it came out that Capone used to buy all of his underwear. He favored custom-tailored union suits made out of ladies' glove silk, which the jury just thought was absolutely hilarious. And next door is the Marquette Building. In the Marquette Building, Capone had his lawyers had their offices. During the trial, he would go over to his lawyers' offices for his lunch break. So one other place we can trace him that's standing. It's not places where he used to throw parties. It's places where he used to scarf a sandwich in between during the trial. Also, after he was found guilty and sentenced to years in prison for tax evasion, we know that he was in Dearborn Station here, at Dearborn and Plymouth, or at the where Plymouth intersects down here. With he was on his way here. He changed trains on the way to prison, and it was while he was changing trains on the way to prison that he was probably the only time that he and Elliott Ness actually crossed paths in real life. Now, beyond this, of course, we have lots and lots of legendary stories about where Capone was. For instance, very common to hear that he had a place called the Stratosphere Club that operated under the dome of the Jewelers Building. This tall one you can see over here. Now, there was, in fact, a place called the Stratosphere Club in the dome of the Jewelers Building, but not until years after Capone went to prison. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever to believe that Al Capone ever set foot in this place. Even more so, you tend to hear an awful lot of stories about the Green Mill up here on Broadway. Oh, that's totally the wrong thing. There we go. Let's redo that. Up on Broadway in Uptown was the Green Mill that various legends attached different gangsters to owning it. In the 1920s, there was definitely mob connections. Whether it was really Machine Gun Jack McGurn, Capone's main hitman, is not really that well known. Several stories especially involve around the comedian and singer Joe Louis, who apparently took a gig here instead of someplace else and then just got his face slashed up and his throat cut outside of it. It's more or less fiction. We don't know how much of it is fiction. We know that he definitely did get attacked, but most of the story comes from his own recollections, which do not hold up to fact-checking even in the slightest. He had been working at another cafe. Some people came to his hotel and hacked him up. The story at first was that it was about a woman. Later it came out it was because he had taken a gig at the cocktail lounge and the gangsters didn't like losing their guy at the Sunset. There's really just not enough verifiable data in this story to make it call one way or the other, and certainly nothing to connect Capone to here. This was way on the other side of town for him. But, of course, the story of Capone ends up where all of the stories end up, in the cemetery. Now, Capone served out his prison time primarily in Alcatraz, then got out of jail, spent most of his time in Miami, other than some weird anecdotes that were written down years and years later by people who claim some connection to Capone. We can't really verify a single time that he ever really came back to Chicago. If he did it under a whole lot of stealth. So he died in his estate. The only time he's known to have really come back was for his own funeral. And there are a couple of Capone graves out there. There's one at Mount Olivet that's still standing, but back in the 1950s, shortly after he was buried there, he was moved to Mount Carmel. And there's his particular marker. Now, kind of by accident, when I was in Cleveland lately, I came upon a relatively new marker for Elliott Ness, which was put here by an admirer years after his death. Now, after Prohibition ended, Elliott Ness effectively drank himself to death. And something I completely was surprised by was right next to Elliott Ness, the next grave down, is Harvey Pekar, the cartoonist, best known for the American Splendor comics. And people like to decorate that one with pens. And that was pretty cool. Elliott Ness, I think the appropriate thing here would be beer bottles, but I don't think anybody's gotten into that. So, I want to go ahead and plug the upcoming events that we've got here in mysterious Chicago. On Thursday night, we're doing Strange Tales from Lakeview and Lincoln Park, including some new stuff since that was run last time back in the summer. Sunday morning, we'll be doing Unsolved Mysteries from Chicago History. I thought that I had done that one a lot lately. I guess I've done it for some library groups, but I haven't done it here in like 6 months. And the following Wednesday, Thursday's not going to work for me on that particular week, so we're doing the nighttime tour on Wednesday. Time Travel Pub Crawl presents Drink Like the Dickens. The listing is already up with links to various recipes for drinks out of Charles Dickens books. Time Travel Pub Crawls, we pretend that we're sailing around through time and space, going to different bars from history. We're going to be going to some Dickensian bars and recreating drinks from the works of Charles Dickens. We did this one last year. It was a load of fun, and I can't wait to do it again. And of course, we do mini tours every single day at 10 a.m. here at the Mysterious Chicago Facebook page. And Friday nights, we do a show on the Patty Vasquez show page called Whiskey and a Cookie, in which we drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. So 3 big events still coming up. Should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, t-shirt, hoodie, you can be cool like Luca is here with their Mysterious Chicago hoodie. cafepress.com/Mysterious Chicago has all of the stuff that you need for right there. And with that, I will put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will just hang out like we always do. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. Here's Benny Goodman.
Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And it is necessary to say, get happy.
Thanks, everybody. Did Elliott Ness have a family? Gary, offhand, I'm not really sure if he did or not. Now, there was talk a while ago of building a statue of Elliott Ness, but other people pointed out most of his story is fiction. Thanks, Ann and Dina. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Todd. See you tomorrow. Thanks, Lydia. Hey, Miles. Did you all notice when Miles, climbed up on my shoulder midway through one of the talks? Kathy, I'm just drinking some throat coat tea today. Yeah, Elliott Ness's biographical details are one of those things that I know off and on, but I never keep them in my head. Yeah, here we go. Now, Miles is the producer. Julie, aren't you my executive producer? That's a title that means nothing. I was an associate producer on a History Channel show. That also doesn't really mean anything. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Patty. Oh yeah, Priya is right there back behind you too. What? That's a good question, Eleanor. What was this? The guy in the Wandering Reporter talked to a saloon proprietor. Officially, the saloons were selling near beer, pea water, non-alcoholic beer. Off the record, many of them were just still in operation. Miles, you get the same craft services as everyone else. Octavio, yeah, the Kevin Costner movie was almost entirely fiction. There really wasn't Al Capone and there really wasn't Elliott Ness. That's about as accurate as that movie gets. Great movie, but it has almost no basis in fact. You ever see that Beavis and Butthead where they drink non-alcoholic beer? I mean, that's good beer. Yes, sir. Miles. Here we go. Thanks, Carol. I can only save you from raking the lead for so long. Priya moved to get a nice, better view. That's nice. Donna, the concert I saw last week was fantastic. Yeah, Patty, it's nothing new. Hollywood has always, embellished the stories, just like old broadsheets and plays used to embellish the stories. Like Shakespeare's Richard III has very little basis in fact. You know, Miles, you can just go sit next to Priya. You'll still be on camera. You don't have to keep climbing the desk. I can never get any work done at the desk anymore. He likes hanging out here too much. But alright, I think I know what he wants. Is it true that J. Edgar Hoover had a thing for women's clothes? The sources on that are very, very slim, as I understand it.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward again, singing I've Got a Feeling You're Fooling.
Okay. Well, where did you guys move that toy? He took it someplace. Here you go. There you go. This is what they've been waiting for the whole tour. Jumps. Whoa. Yeah, having this jumping show with the Benny Goodman is kind of gives it a Charlie Chaplin quality. Alright, got it? No. Alright. They're both very good jumpers. Priya doesn't have the grace, but she does some pretty impressive acrobatics. Oh, they love this thing. I try to keep it hidden in the desk most of the time, but they know it's there. Well, you know what it's the time of year for? We haven't been getting any snow here yet other than those stray flakes yesterday. But, you know what else Miles really enjoys? Is the sled. You go sledding, Miles? Or are you too preoccupied with the mouse right now? Usually I get the sled out, he hops right in for a ride. Thank you, Amy. The cat toy is called the Cat Catcher. Priya, do you want to try sledding? She's never been sledding before. Let's see how this goes. Ready to sled, Priya? Here we go. Okay, no. Okay, Priya does not want to go sledding. I don't take them out on the snow. I just pull them around the apartment. Beverly, you know, we drove around and looked at some decorations a while ago, but there wasn't really a good enough setup to do a live stream of it.
Like gems of ruby, with the stars reflected in the ruby, lives like honey drips.
What else here? We go sledding?
I know the happiness
There we go.
flaming red gold, with the sun reflected in a red, like a work of art. That's you, sweetheart.
All right. Good ride.
And if your memory goes back far enough, you'll recognize this tune.
Let's see
The
if
line
Priya
goes
wants to
through.
try it again a little later.
The dance in it.
Now that she's seen Miles do it. Audrey, you know, I still haven't seen a copy of Murder Maps, but I don't have much to do with the font. Okay, Priya, you ready to try it? You ready to try a ride? It's okay. Oh, okay. I'll spin it around in case you want to try again. Have a seat, Priya. It's okay. She's still got to investigate a little bit. Oh, Miles is back on the desk. Rodney, wherever books are sold, if they don't have it in stock, they can order it. Now, Octavio, they will eventually send me a copy. In fact, they're supposed to send me like 10 of them.
And how they love those fast ones. And now, Benny Goodman signs off with Someday, Sweetheart.
All right, Priya, you gonna have a seat? If you curl up and settle down, I'll give you a ride, Priya. It's okay. Well, Adrena had a PDF copy to approve months and months ago. No, I will get one. You guys don't have to send me one. Okay, we're gonna keep trying this with Priya. Have a good day, Jackie. Toboggan and cats, yeah. Thanks, Tina. Oh, she found a bell and feather toy over there. So, she'll be occupied a bit. Patty, there are comments streaming. Moment to check your settings. Stay spooky, Bob. Oh, Priya, you can write it if you want. You saw Miles write it. Took Miles a couple of weeks to get used to Priya, but now now they play all the time. Priya, that's not a food, but okay, it's fine. I know you're teething. Octavio, a time travel pub crawl book has been on the drawing board a while. It's tough to get a deal for a coffee table book. I'm really more in charge of the text. Usually with those, they'll have somebody who's more in charge of the visuals. And they'll hire somebody to write the text. Thanks, Christine.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
All right, well, Benny's wrapping up. I think that means it's time for me to start wrapping up, too. So, everybody, here's another quick plug for the upcoming events. Thursday night, the second ever presentation of Strange Tales of Lakeview and Lincoln Park. I got to get that one all set back up again. Then on Sunday, a week from today, we'll be doing Unsolved Mysteries from Chicago History, one of my favorites to do. I didn't realize it had been so long since I'd done that one. Then Thursday, the following Thursday, and Wednesday instead of Thursday. Wednesday will be Time Travel Pub Crawl Presents Drink Like the Dickens, our annual holiday presentation. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining me once again. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. See you tomorrow morning for another morning mini tour. And until then, stay safe, stay strong. And of course, if you can. Shouldn't they stay spooky, Miles? Don't you think? Yeah. All right, stay spooky, everybody.